All right, folks, it is 1:30 according to my laptop, my watch, and the school clock. I got a couple more people still coming in, so give me 1 second here. All right, so let's get started. So we got a few different things we're going to try and get done today. Okay, we're going to assemble the carcass or the case for the nightstand. We're going to talk a little bit about where we go next with the nightstand. And we've got a couple videos for you. The first one is going to cover, I figured I wanted to cover drill bits, but it's so difficult to do it in this environment the way we're doing this. And so I found a little 3-minute video that has a real quick introduction to basic woodworking drill bits. And one of the reasons I chose this is that the gentleman does include one of the bits we have to use on our nightstand, and that is a countersink bit. And I'll go a little further in depth, a few seconds at least, when he's done. But we're going to start with a short little 3-second video. So let me pull this up. And these videos are available on your Canvas page for this class. So just look for the week, and this thing will go up out of the way. We'll go to modules. And by the way, I did load the nightstand plans on here. Somebody in one of the classes had asked for a copy of the nightstand plans. Okay, so they're here as well. So here's this little video on all about woodworking drill bits.
Today I'm going to show you 5 different types of drill bits that are especially useful to woodworkers. Whether you're new to woodworking or have years of experience, you're going to want these drill bits in your tool collection. When most people think of drill bits, the common twist bit is what they envision. These bits feature 2 spiraling channels called flutes with sharp tapered cutting edges at the end of the flutes. Twist bits are great all-around drill bits. They're good for cutting most materials, including wood, plastic, and metal. A couple negative considerations, mainly for larger diameter twist bits, are that they tend to tear the wood, leaving a ragged entry hole, and they also will wander if there's not a good starter hole to guide them, especially when drilling at angles. Brad point bits look a lot like twist bits at first glance, but a closer look reveals some key differences that make them more useful in many woodworking applications. First, you'll notice the sharp spur at the tip of the bit. This spur makes it easy to center the bit after marking a hole location. Next, you'll notice a couple sharp spurs at the tips of the flutes. These spurs cleanly shear the perimeter of the hole, and the flutes remove the chips. Brad point bits are best for drilling perpendicular holes, and they leave a nice clean entry. They can jump out of alignment when starting angled holes. They also aren't recommended for making existing holes larger, because the spur can be difficult to center in the existing hole. The tapered tip of a twist bit is easier to center in these applications. Forstner bits are the perfect bit for boring clean, flat bottom holes, especially large diameter holes for applications like European hinges. These bits are also great for boring overlapping holes, such as a mortise. These bits feature a cutting edge around the perimeter and a couple cutters that shear the wood and leave a flat bottom hole. If you bore deep holes, you'll need to use a vacuum to remove the chips and keep it from clogging around the bit. Larger Forstner bits often feature a jagged perimeter cutting edge. These are more aggressive and intended to more quickly bore large holes. Combination countersink bits combine a twist bit for drilling a pilot hole and a countersink to create the tapered recess for the screw head, all in one operation. The twist bit component is often tapered to work well with tapered wood screws. These bits are available in a variety of sizes to match the size of the screw you're using. Self-centering bits make it easy to drill pilot holes when you're installing hardware. These special bits feature a small twist bit that is inside a spring-loaded sleeve. The sleeve is tapered at the end to center itself in hardware holes. These bits come in a variety of sizes and make boring hinge holes a snap. So there you have it, the 5 most useful bits for woodworkers. Now there are lots of other specialty bits out there that you'll need for specific projects, such as pocket hole joinery. But if you've got these 5 bits in your workshop, they'll cover most of the holes you need to drill, and they'll ensure great results.
All right, so that's just a quick little video on bits. Much better job than I could have done in here in an entire class covering those bits. I don't have a crew of people editing film for me. That would be nice. But okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to show you that is because I went ahead and drilled some holes on the sides of the nightstand. So I want you to see this. And I need to turn that so I can see what I'm showing you. Otherwise, what good is it? So one of those bits that we use a lot in this shop, okay, is a countersink bit. Okay, wrong way, right way. Okay, so let's see if we can zoom in even more on that. Okay, so it's a countersink bit. All right. So we use this a lot in here. There's different sizes. In other words, what changes in regards to size is the diameter of this barrel portion as well as the diameter of this pilot bit. We can also loosen a little Allen screw right here and extend this pilot bit off further. But a couple of things I want you to notice. This bit will actually do three separate processes. Okay, if I put this against the white table, you can see a little better. Oh, maybe not. Okay, so. Jeez. All right. So if you, and it depends on how deep you go. All right. So if you just go in using the depth of the twist drill bit part, it's just a pilot hole, just pre-drills a hole for a screw. Then I don't know if you can see it or not. I wish you could see a little better, but this portion right here is a tapered portion. Okay. If you just go into the top of this tapered portion, in other words, if you just drill down, so I can show you this on this board. Okay, if you only go down that deep, it's going to set the head of a bugle-shaped screw flush with the surface of the wood. Okay, what we generally do in here, since we don't like to see fasteners at all if we can avoid it in here, we don't like to see screws, we don't like to see nails, things like that. What we generally do is we go even a little deeper down this main cylinder portion, the round portion. What that's called is a counter bore. And what that will do is that will set the head of a screw below the surface of the wood, which is what we want. We don't want to have the screw sitting proud of the surface here. And if we have it sitting just flush with the surface, we're still going to see it. But if we set it below the surface, and especially if we're doing this in solid wood, we can actually make our own little plugs out of whatever wood we want. We can plug that hole so you can't see the screw. Okay. So that's one of the reasons we use that. Let me make sure you guys are hearing me okay. Okay, everybody, okay, seems like, all right. So hopefully you can hear me. So that's one of the reasons we use those. Now I went ahead and took the liberty of, and we'll go that way a little bit, drilling these holes. Okay, so we did the pocket holes yesterday, 1, 2, 3 along the front edge, 2 at the top. And then there's these 4 little countersink holes that we're going to use to attach the side trim to the project. Okay, so I went ahead and drilled those. I don't think you want to sit there and watch me drill 8 countersink holes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and assemble this guy. Now, the first thing we do before we ever assemble or glue up a project is we do what's called a dry fit. In other words, as best we can, depending on the joinery we're using, we put it together with no glue and no fasteners. This gives us the opportunity to find out if everything fits right, if everything's going well. The other thing it's going to do for us, I want to bring this up, this is an important concept. As it stands right now, this little cabinet, okay, it's not square. It's never going to be square. There's nothing you can do to make it square. It's not going to happen. What I mean by square is, okay, I don't know if you can see that. It's not very far out, so it doesn't look that bad. But this is definitely not square, okay? There's really no way, the way this cabinet sits right now without a back, to make it square, okay? It's not going to happen. And if it's not square, when you go to attach a face frame on here, when you go to put a drawer in it, anything like that, it's just not going to work well. It's going to be very, very difficult, okay? So we have a way to make cabinets square, okay? The easiest way for us to make these nightstand cabinets square is to take a back like this that we know is square. And we know it is because of the way we processed it and milled it, and we can also check it, okay? So, all right, we're good and square, okay? So, since we know this is square, we have a known entity here. We can use this to square this, and this is how we do it. When we install it, when we install the back, okay, so this opening right here, this is the opening for the drawer right here. This will be the top of the nightstand. This is the bottom of the nightstand, okay? So if you look at the top, let's see what's the best way to show you guys this, okay? The joint where the side meets the back, okay? If it's like this, if it's sticking out, I go the wrong way every time, okay? Let me show you this a little closer. Okay, if it's not flush right here, if this is proud of this side or this is proud of this, it's not going to work. So at the top of the nightstand, and the top only, we want to make sure that this is perfectly flush right here, this joint, this side with this back, okay? We're going to do the same thing at the other top corner right here, okay? So that's how we're going to keep it square, because once we get it so that both corners are nice and flush, then we know for a fact, since that back is square, we know for a fact the cabinet is square, okay? That's what's going to do it for us, all right? So everything fits good. There's a small little gap at the back of the shelf here that's designed into it, okay? There should be a little gap back here where the shelf meets the back, but it should be flush at the front. We're going to attach a face frame on here. We want it snug to all these surfaces, so these need to be flush. The front of the shelf is flush with the sides, and we're going to be attaching a top right here. So this is another reason we want the sides flush with the back. We don't want the back sticking up or the sides sticking down or something like that. Okay, so we're ready to put it together. It dry fit just fine. We're going to take it apart. We've got everything we need. We've got our two sides sitting here. Let me back this up a little bit. Hey, I did it the right way that time. How about that? Christmas miracle. Okay. We've got our glue here. We've got an 18 gauge rad nailer here with 1 1/4 inch long rads. We've got our back with our shelf sitting on top of it, okay? Our sides sitting here with the rabbets touching. The reason we're setting them here with the rabbets touching, that's because it's the same way we dry fit it. We're gonna do the glue up the exact same way we do a dry fit. We wanna make it comfortable and easy to do. One of the things that can happen is we use a water-based glue, okay? So, especially on this particle board, what can happen is if you put your glue on here and you let it sit for very long, okay, since this is a water-based product, this particle board is going to start to suck all the moisture out of that glue. What it's going to do is it's going to swell the particle board. So you're not going to be able to get your shelves in. They're not going to fit in there. That data will swell up so much they won't fit. So we want to make sure that we dry fit it a couple times so we know how it goes together. We're comfortable with the way it goes together. And so that once we put glue on it, we can move pretty quick. We don't want to just put glue on it and go hang out with our friends, order pizza, you know, sit around, do nothing. We want to get it on. We've got a couple minutes to get it together, and that's about it. All right, so we get our glue on. And this is one of the reasons we have the rabbets touching. So now all I have to do is just run a bead of glue all the way across it instead of going here and then here, you know, we've done this so many times that we know the easiest and most effective way to do it. So we'll get glue on there. Okay, we're just gonna take our finger and spread this glue a little bit so it doesn't tend to drip as much when we pick the second side up. You'll see what I mean here. It'll drip a little bit probably, but usually what I do is take the glue and wipe it on the side of the table there, so next time a student walks up and leans up against the table, they get on their pants, but there's no students here, so it's no fun. All right, so there's our glue. We're gonna set the front corner of the shelf flush with the front edge of the nightstand. And you may not get it perfect. It doesn't happen every time, but I'll show you how we fix it. Same thing here, front corner, tilt it in, give it a little tap, okay? We're gonna get this side up, get that front corner on, push it on. Should be a nice snug little fit. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this on its face, and I should have had this here before, but get a little piece of scrap wood. We never want to take a mallet and bang directly on particle board. It'll mushroom it. So what this is doing is getting the shelf flush at the front of the nightstand. We can set our back on. There's that. We're going to stand it back up. Now, this larger opening here, this is where our doors is going. So this is the top of the nightstand. So we're going to make sure that the side is flush with the back right here at the top. Okay, it's got to be perfectly flush. You can feel it when it is. Okay, take the nail gun, get it centered, boom. Okay. A few more nails across the back. The nails are really there more to hold it while the glue's drying than anything else. We'll put a nail centered on the shelf at the front of each shelf. We're going to grab the back so it doesn't flop out. We'll flip it over. We'll do the same thing over here. This is the top of our nightstand. We're going to get it flush right here at the top corner. Probably one of the more important parts of this, if not the most important part of this assembly, is making sure that's flush. Give it a shot. Make sure our back's in. A few more nails across the back. And one at the front of each shelf. All right, so that's that. Now, a couple things about nailing, about using one of these nail guns. It's usually one of the more enjoyable things that students do when they first get into the shop. But let me tell you a couple things about these guys, okay? I'll zoom in here a little bit so you can see it. So, a couple tips from an old guy, okay? Number one, you want to keep the nail gun vertical, straight up and down. You don't want it angled. Where's the nail gonna go? You don't want it angled this way. Where's the nail gonna go? It's gonna come flying out the back, okay? And you also don't, let me put it this way so you can see it. You don't want it like this or like this, okay? We wanna go as straight, perpendicular to the material as we can, okay? Well, I got somebody waiting to get in, or they got booted and trying to get back in. Okay. Another tip about nail guns, and this comes from somebody who's done it to themselves one time, all right? So a lot of times, especially when you're nailing this back on, what people tend to do is put their hand here, okay, to hold the back in place, put the nail gun like this. Now, it's entirely possible that once this nail is shot into this back, okay, that it may decide it doesn't want to go straight in. It may decide it wants to change direction once it gets into the material. And if it does that, in other words, the nail can bend once it's getting shot in there. If it does that and your hand is sitting right here, it's entirely possible it could shoot out and pop you in the hand. I've had that happen to myself once, and only once, because it hurts like crazy. I had the palm of my hand like this. I'm holding it like this. And when I shot it, it came out, turned around, Shot me right in the meat of the hand right there. Hurt my pec. All right. So watch where your hands are when you're using it. Safety glasses always. And we never point this at anybody. We consider this a weapon, and we don't point weapons at people. All right. So there you go. You now have a beautiful, well, maybe not beautiful, handsome nightstand. The next thing we're going to do to it, we are going to paint the inside, and I'll probably do this tonight, paint the inside of the large opening and the two sides. We're not going to paint in here where the drawer goes. You're not going to see it. There's going to be a drawer there. We're not going to paint under here because there's going to be a wide piece of solid material that goes here and covers that. And we're not going to paint the back because, contrary to what you might be thinking, most people don't set these nightstands in the middle of a room so that you can walk around them. They generally go against a wall, right? So there's really no need to paint the back. Now, that brings up a point about the material that we're using here as opposed to, excuse me, solid material, solid stock like pine, poplar, alder, oak, stuff that's not sheet goods, okay? One of the benefits of sheet goods like this is that it doesn't tend to expand and contract with changes in temperature and humidity the way solid wood does. If you've ever noticed a door in the wintertime that is really loose, but in the summertime when it's hot and humid, it sticks, okay? That's because of expansion and contraction of the material. So if this entire case was made of solid material as opposed to sheet goods, particle board, and I was going to paint it or put a finish on it, I would want every single surface covered. I don't want to leave any surfaces without a finish on it on solid wood, because that's going to change the rate at which moisture enters the material on certain surfaces. In other words, if I put a nice lacquer or something like that on one surface, but not on another surface, moisture is going to enter that unfinished surface at a lot quicker rate than it will on the finished surface. So I don't want to do that to a solid material project. Here's a good example, a coffee table. All right, let's say you make a coffee table and you decide to varnish the coffee table and you stand it up, sitting straight the way it's normally going to sit, and you do all the top of the table, you do the sides of the legs, things like that, and you leave it at that. What you've done is you put finish on everything but the underside of the top, on the bottom of the legs, things like that. So now you've got surfaces where moisture enters at different rates. That's going to cause differing rates of contraction and absorption and can cause real problems. Wood was once a living thing, and contrary to what a lot of people think, is once you make a piece of furniture, that kind of is still a living thing. It still moves and breathes. It draws moisture in. It expels moisture. It still has those same cellular pathways that it used to get nutrients up through a tree to the leaves, things like that. So we have to compensate for that in a lot of our designs. We have to compensate for the possibility or the probability that the wood's going to move at some point in time with changes in temperature and humidity. Okay, so that's my wood movement talk. I'll get that painted tonight, probably. Okay, if you have questions at any point in time, please, please, please ask. It makes me feel like I'm not alone here. That's probably one of the, well, the fact that you guys aren't here really sucks, but you're not here, but it's even worse that I'm sitting here and I feel like I'm by myself, as you guys probably do, unless you got family around you right now. So it's like lonely as heck in here. It sucks. So if you have questions, please ask questions. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at a quick video that I thought was pretty cool that I think you guys might like. I'm not even going to bother introducing it. It's available on our website as usual. I try to always post these there. And this one is about some cat that makes epoxy cutting boards. So I hope you enjoy this.
Caleb, with You Can Make This Too, this video I'm going to be making some epoxy cutting boards, and with Christmas coming up, I actually have these and some other cutting boards available for sale on my website, and this month's Patreon contest prize is the Rigid Octane Jigsaw. If you're interested in those things, information's in the description. Otherwise, stick with me and I'll show you how you can make this too. My joiner was out of commission when I started working on these, and the wood I'm using has some twist, so I improvised a planer sled to get them flat. I just used a large flat board that I had laying around and some craft sticks with hot glue to balance the twist and secure the board before running it through the planer. Once the top came out of the planer flat, I could take everything off the sled and then run the other face through the planer. Then I cut off the ends that have some checking. I left it long in case I had any snipe at the planer. Next up is removing the bark. Leaving it on would be cool, but I'm afraid the bark might not be attached strong enough, and I don't want this breaking in half, so I'm going to take it off. A draw knife makes pretty quick work of it, but it's not the only tool you can use. A chisel works pretty well too. Really, just, use whatever you've got. You do you. I'm going to stick with the draw knife though. Now that I've got these milled, I can start breaking them down into the sections that'll become the boards. Probably get 3 out of this one, maybe 4 out of this one. I measure and mark out the boards to about equal lengths. Everything at this point is still rough measurements. I use a square just to be able to strike straight lines to follow, but there's really nothing to be squared to at this point. I used the jigsaw to break down the boards. There's likely going to be some tension in these, and the jigsaw is the least likely saw to bind or kick back, so it's the safest. To mark the middle of these boards, I like to stand up my straight edge on edge to find the middle, then lay it down and mark it. Because my straight edge is so wide, if I just lay it down, it kind of plays tricks on my eyes and makes it really hard to fairly accurately find the middle. A track saw or table saw jig are 2 ways to get a really clean split on these boards. I don't have those though, so I'm going to do another rough split and clean it up. There's lots of tool options for that, just do what works for you. After I cut the first one, I realize I probably should mark the boards so I don't get them all mixed up, so I do that and then cut the rest in half. And whichever method you use, it's unlikely to come out flat. As you can see, mine aren't perfectly flat, so that's next, is getting a flat surface there, just like milling anything. Now that one side's flat, it's a lot easier to see how unflat the other side is. And I know not everyone has hand planes, so if you don't, just come over to your 1890s really rare jointer with absurdly expensive Sheelix cutter head, spray down some glue, lay out your sandpaper, because this is a nice flat surface, PPE, and get it flat that way. Now that I have a straight edge to reference, I'll cut the ends of the boards square to the straight line down the middle and to length. So off camera I set this up. It looks like a lot, but it's really pretty simple, and if you've seen epoxy pours, this is nothing new. I've just got some plywood that I use, a bunch of tuck tape. Any really good tape is going to work fine because the epoxy doesn't stick to it. And the idea is just a non-stick surface so you can actually get your pieces out. I made a compartment for each board, and I didn't do a good job measuring, so I've kind of got this extra area here. And to make sure everything is holding down okay, I had one of these, I think it's actually soap making silicone molds that I pour excess epoxy into, and as you can see I cut that up, and that just gives me something to push my clamp to, but this is covered in silicone which the epoxy isn't going to stick to, so I have something to help give some downward pressure to make sure my stock doesn't float up but also isn't going to stick to the epoxy. So now it's just time to mix it up and pour. One note on the construction of this, you can see that I obviously taped all the surfaces. For these kind of pieces, I would tape the bottom and then run a piece on the top. But after I assembled it all, I made sure to tape all the joints as well to just make this as tight as possible. The last thing I want is, half a gallon of epoxy leaking everywhere. And for this, I'm using Total Boat Fix Set. Of course, they're the sponsor for the video. I've got a discount code in the description if you want to check that out. And this is a 3-to-1. So that's how we're going to mix it. 3 parts of this to 1 part of hardener. Now we just stir forever, and I should be wearing a respirator. You should wear a respirator if you do this too. A nice thing about working with these thick set deep pour epoxies is it's not a race against the clock like normal 2-to-1, even in these larger batches. If I was doing like some regular 2-to-1, I'd be really worried about this kicking off on me. And you can see I already kind of have staged what I'm going to do, so I mix this up. Not really sure how much I'm going to need, so I'm just going to play it by ear. I could have done all the math, but that would be math. So instead of that, I just have a bunch mixed up here, and I'll pour it off, mix up my colors as I go, and if I run out, I'll just mix up some more. And I'm not going to go crazy with my pigment because I want this to be kind of translucent, not a solid opaque. There we go. I like that. Could have gotten away with a little less pigment, but it's pretty deep in here. Once I pour it out, it should be a little bit more translucent. Alright, I'm just going to start on the first one. I've got about 10 ounces in here. That's just a reference for when I do the others, how much to separate. I'll see how far this goes. And these cups are really handy because they give you all the different ratio measurements. Anyway, let's see how this goes, and hopefully nothing leaks. Okay, yeah, that got me about halfway to where I need. So I'm going to mix up another 10 and see how that goes. Okay, I poured another 10 ounces out, added pigment, and I went a little heavier on the pigment this time because that's a little more translucent I want. So let's see how this goes. Okay, getting close to the top, so I might need just a little bit more. Yeah, I think I need a little bit more. I'll just go ahead and finish this off. But Memphis, I'm in Memphis, and Memphis colors are blue and white, so I'm going to add a little bit of white to this and try to mix that in, see how that goes. There we go, and this just started cresting, so that's perfect. Get some shape to it. Yeah, I kind of like where that goes. Kind of dip and pull. Cool. All right, that one's done. Okay, see this? This isn't cool. I'm worried. I got some drips, so time to add more tape quickly. So while thick set epoxies have their merits, like being able to release the air bubbles, get off gas, and being able to pour thick and not having to do a bunch of thin pours, the other downside is if you have anywhere it can leak out, it will, because it's not going to set up quick. So it'll just find all those little places and just seep out. All right, crisis averted. I think I've got the dripping stopped. Bad news is I used all this up, which when I realized that first one took 22-ish ounces, there wasn't going to be enough. All I had left in here was 11. I've got 2 more to go. They're a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and mix up another batch. Start with 20. This one I'm going to do green. This is emerald green. Yeah, this is a nice rich color that I think will go with the air-dried walnut very nicely. This one will be a little bit easier. I'm not going to do any color mixing. No, I think I want that deeper. Add some more pigment. Yeah, it's hard to know how much pigment to add because it looks a lot darker in my container because it's deeper, and when it goes in here and it's not quite as thin, you know, then it's not as vibrant. Oh shoot, looks like we're just a touch low. Add just a little bit more. And I think that's good. And for my last one, I'm gonna experiment, do a mix. I've got this Diamond Deep Sea Blue, which is a really nice deep blue. Use a lot of it. Kind of got a little bit better idea how much pigment to use. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of this Diamond Battleship Gray. And I'm not gonna entirely mix this so it goes through. I want to keep it kind of streaky, so. And now the last pour. Yeah, and I can just kind of detect the gray sparkle in there, subtle, very nice, I like it. Now, I guess we just come back in 3 days and hopefully it's not all over my floor. And if you're wondering about this, this is a coffee table top for a coffee table I'm making. That's a collaboration with Richard from 42 Fab, who is an awesome metal fabricator we're gonna be getting together soon on this. So if you want to catch that video and see what this looks like, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. And this is part of my new living room suite, which is also going to include a cool couch and console table. Let me give you a teaser on that couch. This is where I am on that couch. These are the side pieces. We've got this really cool orange heart pinstriping going on. If you want to see how this comes together, you know what to do. The boards I have had a few days to cure, so it's time to take them out of the mold. Using the epoxy pieces and the silicone worked great to hold down the boards. You can see how they didn't stick at all. So now for lots of unscrewing and pounding this apart, hopefully without ruining the boards. The tuck tape worked amazingly well and none of the epoxy stuck to it at all. Getting the boards loose from the bottom was a little tricky. They'd formed a vacuum lock or something and were really stuck on there good. I didn't want to pound directly on the boards, so I tried hanging the plywood off the edge of the vents and then hitting the plywood to make it bend and break the seal, and that worked really effectively. I slightly overfilled the epoxy, so to flatten the boards back down, I send them through my drum sander. It's important to go slow with really light passes because sanding builds up a lot of heat, and when the epoxy gets hot, it just turns into a gummy mess that clogs and ruins the paper, and changing this paper is a pain. In hindsight, it would have been better to slightly underfill the void and then sand the wood down to level with the epoxy instead of overfilling and sanding the epoxy, because the wood sands faster and easier, but lessons learned. Sanding was so monotonous, I forgot to bring you guys along for the ride. So with the sanding, I was able to get all the extra epoxy off the top and bottom and get them nice and flat, but from the molds there was epoxy all the way around the sides. So I used the table saw to get everything off the sides, but they're still on the ends, so I'm going to go to the For an edge treatment on these, I used a 45-degree chamfer bit in my router table. This could also be done freehand or with a hand plane. The epoxy actually routed really nice. I've had good luck avoiding blowout on the corners by routing the long grain first and then doing end grain, but always be very careful routing end grain. Off camera, I wet the boards to pop the grain, and once they dried, I sanded them with 220 on the random orbit sander. Then I switched to micromesh pad kit, and I run through all of the grits of that on the epoxy to polish it up. And as I go, you can see how the epoxy gets clearer. The last step before oiling is branding them with my commission brand, which is the Custom Furniture Guy, because you can make this too, doesn't really sell, pay me to do it for you. And now the most satisfying part, the mineral oil bath. I'll shut up and let you enjoy it. And as a bonus for sticking around, here's some oiling shots of other cutting boards I made. Don't forget that I have these available for sale on my website, and the holidays are coming up. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, learned something, or were at least entertained. Until next time, make time to make something.
Well, I hope you guys liked that. I thought it was kind of enjoyable. Not too difficult to do. It does take some practice and a little bit of knowledge on what epoxy to buy and how to mix it properly and how to get the bubbles out and things like that. We haven't used a lot of that here. There's been one epoxy river table done, a couple other small epoxy projects. We've done epoxy in routed fretboards on guitars and on headstocks on guitars, but it's been really small amounts of epoxy on those things. But it's pretty neat stuff. It's kind of fun to use, but it takes, you know, a respirator and all these things most of the time, because when they're curing or when they're pouring it, they're giving us some pretty gnarly little fumes. So, all right. So tomorrow we'll have a short quiz, and I'll be sure and cover anything that the quiz covers well prior to taking it. So you shouldn't have any problem. It's just gonna be a few simple questions. And we'll probably take them from the plans for the nightstand. And the plans for the nightstand are posted on the website. You can take a look at them right here. Okay, when you go to modules, right, here's the nightstand plans right here, the same ones we've been looking at. You just click on that bad boy and open it with PDX or whatever you open it with. And here's the plans that we're working from for the nightstand. Okay. So those are available. We'll make sure you guys are more than comfortable with anything that might be on the quiz. Okay. So all I need for you to do now is please type your name into the chat so I can take attendance. It was nice having you guys here. I hope you enjoyed that. Take care of yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. All right. Bye.